welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast. My name is Chris Patton, and I'm the global CEO of His Way at Work. And today I have a good friend and a fellow business owner, a gentleman by the name of Phil Hanson. And Phil is the president of a company called CH Hanson. And this is one of those rare companies. I've known one other company that I came into contact with years ago, a Ford dealership that was over 100 years old. Phil's company is a family-owned manufacturing company. They manufacture tools, 3 different brands across multiple channels, but they're 5th generation. Folks, this company was started in 1866, 150-something years ago. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
So you're clearly not that old to have been here from the beginning. So tell me a little bit of background on the family dynamics of this 5-generation company that you lead.
Well, I am the 4th generation, and my nephew, who's our vice president, he's the 5th. He's the 5th generation. We have been in business for a long time, and surprisingly, we are not the oldest privately held manufacturer out there. There are a number of other companies out there that are older than we are. But when you think about it, there's all kinds of companies that have been around for a long time, rope companies and all carriage companies and things like that. But we've been around for. People ask us all the time, Chris, how in the world have you guys managed to be around since 1866? And I tell them it's really easy. It's simply God's grace, because we are not the smartest. We are not the smartest. We're not the best educated. We are just hardworking people that love our folks and love the Lord. And He has been gracious enough to help us through some really difficult times. We got burned out in the Chicago fire. We survived, through multiple wars, and changed our business around all different ways. We've manufactured all different kinds of products, and in that period of time, some we still manufacture today. We still make stencils today, which is one of the first products that we made when the company was founded by my great-grandfather when he emigrated from Denmark. He brought over the stencil making trade when he came over. And then he was in New York for a period of time and couldn't find any work. So he volunteered in the 39th New York Volunteer Infantry, fought in the Civil War, and worked his way through Chicago, and then came back here after he was injured at Gettysburg.
Wow. What an incredible story. Another day, you and I'll have to just sit and talk about that, because that just thrills me. I love history, and I love to hear more about that story. Just, wow. So congratulations on being, number one, on leading a company with such a heritage. But number 2, you've already said it. You're the 4th generation, and the 5th is already in place. We talked the other day about the progression there and the change you're seeing there. It's fantastic. Yeah. And that's a testimony to, as you said, to God's grace, but also to you and your family's obedience and following that. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Sure.
So you guys have been with His Way at Work for how long now?
I think, I was thinking about that. I think it's 5 years, I think.
That is awesome. And so you and I first met. 4. Go ahead. Maybe 4? Or maybe more.
We met at Current in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Whatever year that was.
Yeah, that was 19. Yep. So
and then we started His Way at Work shortly after that, because you were such an overwhelmingly influential speaker.
Oh man, I think you've got me confused with somebody else, Phil. But I'll take it for the moment. So in a nutshell, and obviously we're not talking about 150-something years of history, but in the last 4 or 5 years, how has that implementation, how has that shift impacted CH Hanson?
It's a really good question, and we could spend literally half an hour just kind of dissecting that. in our business, in our family business, people have been a core at our family business for as many years as I've been working there. My dad was always known as a tremendous people person, and my dad was known for doing all kinds of acts of service, known and unknown, for different people in our factory when we were downtown and then out in the suburbs. And so that's been a part of our DNA for a long time. It's just that my dad always told me things like, because, people always tell you that you check your emotions at the door. You take whatever happened before you get to work. People always tell you got to check that when you walk in the door and leave all that behind. My dad's like, that's just not the way it works with people, because you can't separate people from their emotions, from their experiences, from what happened just 5 minutes before they get in the door. So you have to recognize that because as a manager, leader of people, director of people, you have to know that is part of who they are.
Right.
And I think part of our journey has been, my dad set the example, and we had, even back when we were a much, much smaller company, we still had 60 employees. We had a lot of employees. And now we're a much bigger company, and we have about 100 employees. The big shift for me has been with his way at work is recognizing that I simply, for as much as I desire to know everybody, to understand everybody, and try and share in their life experience, it's just not going to happen. And that as your company grows, as your team is being built, there are going to be people that are just simply not going to talk to me anymore. That was a kind of a funny realization, that for as much as I would love for them to talk to me, they're just not. And they're never going to tell me exactly what's going on. And unfortunately, when you walk around and you say, hi, good morning, how you doing? You get a lot of them doing fine. I'm doing fine. But in reality, they're not doing fine. And his way at work has really helped us take our desire to truly engage with people on a personal level. And it's allowed us to push that down throughout the organization. So there's many people, multiple people in our company that people can go to and tell them what's really going on. I am one set of eyes. We call it Hanson Helps. Our Hanson Helps team is another 5 or 6 sets of eyes, and it's allowed us to push that caring culture down throughout the organization, and not it really, it's just that it's you're sharing that love, and you can't do it. One person can't do it. You might be able to do it for 4 or 5 people, maybe even 10, but you get beyond that, it's just like, it's not going to happen.
Man, that's so good. And that is so central to what I wanted to talk with you about this morning, because one of the challenges, one of the challenges we're seeing in, business owner after business owner, leader after leader that I speak with is telling me today, and not just today, it's been the last 3 years, frankly, since COVID, but it's just hard to hire really good people, good to the core, good character people that also are very competent. That combination today, in some cases, in some industries, in some places, locations, it's hard to find just bodies at all. But even when you can find those, it's very difficult to find the good and the competent. And I'm assuming you guys are having some of that challenge as well. Is that the case?
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's any place in the U.S. that's not experiencing that same thing. And you hear about it, and it's said and repeated often because it's true. Culture trumps pay. Culture trumps all kinds of things. You have to have a culture where people want to belong to that culture. And then the one thing I've learned over the last 35 years is that if you get your culture right, your culture can also cover up a lot of other mistakes along the way.
Yes.
When I think about some good managers we've had, some bad managers we've had, and why some really good people have stuck around even when they have a bad manager from time to time, it's the culture. It's because if they know the leadership, they trust the culture, they trust the leadership team, they know that eventually it's going to get right. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened over the years where bad department manager or whatever, and it's just like, man, I'm so glad that person stuck it out until we got this thing right. And we've seen that in our own business where we measure, we do employee engagement surveys and net promoter scores, and we've seen that kind of the his way at work penetration actually help improve our net promoter scores, which is very simply the net promoter score in our company is just simply, hey, if you had a brother, sister, husband, wife that was interested in getting a job, would you recommend this company to that person? It's just as simple as that. And it's either yes or no or indifferent. And we measure that. And we've been measuring that now for about, I think 8 years. And when we first started out 8 years ago, our net promoter score was brutal. And that was a real wake up call for us. It's like, wow, we got a lot of work to do.
Well, that's good to hear that it's improving and that you're focusing on it. And, we've heard it before. If you measure it, it will improve if you're paying attention to it. So, so in finding good people, are there any things that you're doing at C.H. Hanson to either leverage that culture to recruit or to draw? Are you seeing referrals? If these employees are answering, yes, I would recommend, are they actually doing it? Are you seeing sourcing of new hires in that way?
This is not this was not intentional, but I'm sure I know the Lord's hand is behind that. We have gone into some kind of an unusual, maybe not non-typical ways. We've hired people that have got some pretty serious issues in their background from a legal standpoint, and through careful interviewing and careful processing, we've looked at that avenue for bringing people on and had tremendous success there. We've brought on people that we hired a company to help us work with some people that have got that are autistic, to try and bring them into the workforce. And I think we're just keeping our eyes open that, while we do have a candidate that we're looking for, we're willing to take risks with some other people just because they're people and we love them that other people haven't. We've got some people that are at our company that have had some really serious health issues. And just kind of a funny story, Chris, we recently hired a plant manager, and I'm sitting down with him, and I've happened to know him for a long time. And he's like, well, tell me about the team. So I get done telling him about the team, and I'm like, I got done telling him about the team. I'm like, I hope this guy sticks around because he's going to be looking at this going, holy cow, I got people with this background and that background, and people that can't speak English, and people that are going to ESL classes, and it wasn't intentional. It's just kind of happened that way. And I think our company for 150 some odd years has always been that way. We've just looked at people as people, and just tried to and work as best as we can with them, because that's what God does with God. That's what God does with us.
That's right.
And we've had, it's worked. It's worked, and it's had challenges, and it's had a lot of ups and downs. And I've heard our church oftentimes describe the church as like we're not so much a church as we are a hospital, and that everybody's got different wards and different floors and different ailments. And I've been reflecting on this more and more over the last couple of years, that our factory, our business is no different. Our business, we are a company, but we are a hospital. We are all broken people with different levels of brokenness and different visibility into that brokenness. Some brokenness is very apparent, and some of it is not apparent. And when you recognize that, and you want to care for people at that level, you've got to get into that level, and you got to work with it. We kind of call it the Good Samaritan principle out of Matthew, right? Where you when the Good Samaritan comes along, he doesn't just give him a little bit of money and tell him to go on his way. He picks him up and he carries him and he gives him his coat, and he's got full contact with that person, which means that guy is probably bloody and he's probably stinky, and it's just that's just the kind of thing that we're called to do, called to that level of care, not just recognition, but interaction, and then movement, and trying to do something about it. So I think the recognizing the fact that we are more of a hospital than anything else is probably something that's been really cool for us in trying to retain employees and then create a culture where people can actually recognize the culture. And that's the part that has been so difficult to accomplish. You can do it, but having somebody that you're actually interviewing recognize it, that's the hard part. And and the more people that can talk to them and tell them about it, the easier that is for them to recognize.
Yeah, your expectations can't be that we wait until the interview to convince them of culture, right? You want, to the degree you can, you want to have your employees prepping them, right? This is a referral, or they've met somebody out in the community that works at C.H. Hanson, and there's some context before they walk in. You can still show them some things during the interview and through that process, right? We've talked to a number of businesses that they don't just do interviews, and if the person doesn't pass, well, we'll move on to the next. There is a process after a no in an interview where they're caringly passing them along to either give them guidance in another direction or whatever, but it's loving them even though it's not a candidate anymore, even though that person isn't. But yeah, so there's, like we said, we could go so deep into this because there's so much we can do. What I'm hearing from you, a couple things that stand out. One, you don't become a fifth generation, 150 plus year old company if you're not resourceful, right? If you think you can take the plan that your great grandfather had to start off with and run that plan for the next 150 plus years, if you think you can run it for 6 months anymore, you might be mistaken. But you guys are resourceful. You're finding other ways to bring employees in. When there's not a line standing at the door that looks one way, then you look for other sources, and you start not just looking at other sources, but figuring out how does that type of candidate fit into this company, and what special ways do we need to handle and treat and care for. So kudos to you guys for what you're doing and the way you're just approaching these people that work around C.H. Hanson. So that's a huge deal. Now, the challenge, not just finding good people, but the ancillary challenge, if you want to call it that, is when the market is difficult to find good people, and they're not just waiting at the door, good and competent people, right? Then the tendency is the people we have that are already here, they may be good people character-wise, or they may be very competent at their job, but there are certain people in our companies that are not both. And the challenge can be anytime, but even more so in a tough market. when I've got someone who's really competent at the work, but maybe they're not quite a perfect fit with the culture, but man, they've been here for a long time. Maybe things have changed in them to move them away from the culture, or maybe the culture has moved away from where they thought it was 5, 10, 20 years ago, any number of reasons, but they're no longer a fit culturally. It's a
Yeah.
hard decision to make. And you and I were talking the other day, and you mentioned a situation you had faced. I'd love you to just take it from there and kind of describe to us what that looked like and the challenges, the things you were feeling as you're going into that.
Yeah, we had somebody that had been working with us for a long time, and I considered him to be a close friend, and we'd worked together for years, and he was a key part of our team, and you know, always knew that there was, we're all a little quirky, right? So we're all a little different, and I knew that he could be kind of a hard guy to get along with, and what I ignored though is how much that is how difficult that was on some of our people, and there are sins of omission and there are sins of commission, and I was clearly committing a sin of omission for a long time, and the Lord was working on me for a long time, and there was some good that came out of this, but it was extremely difficult. But at some point, my desire to not have to fill that role was greater than God's desire for his company. It's his company. It's his culture, and he was, and it was clearly not God's will for this person to be in that position. And it took me a lot longer than it should have to really kind of get to that point where my fear of having my fear of the Lord was greater than my fear of not having this person on my team.
Do you
And
mind
it's just
sharing? Do you mind sharing in that if you can remember this, in the moment that you finally came to the point where that became clear? What were some things that you did leading up to that moment that you believe helped get you there? In other words, for someone listening that
yeah.
may be coming up on that, what were some things that you personally
I
did?
had to, I actually had to start listening and actually internalizing. As a leader, we do a lot of listening. I mean, people do a lot of talking to us, and they were talking to me, and I'd been here and talked, but the talk had been good. But the Lord, at the same time, I was in Proverbs, studying Proverbs, and the Lord was just like, you need to listen. And there's so many times when the Lord says in the Bible, he goes, you need to listen. So I'm like, wow, okay. So I listened, and then I knew I knew I could not be partial. So I had to hire somebody to come in to be impartial. And then I just, because I kind of knew what was gonna happen. I kind of like, all right, but I still don't. I kind of know where this thing is leading, but I need to do this independently. So got a lot of other people watching too, and people need to know that it's not that the company's not just about me and my desires and my leadership skills, because this was clearly a failure on my part. I had to see people. People had to see that it was coming from an area of. From a different area. So I had to hire somebody to come in and really do a full-blown investigation. And then it was clear at the end of that investigation what the outcome was going to be. And boy, that was probably the most difficult day I've had in maybe ever. But ultimately, ultimately the Lord was telling me, he's like, look, I've cared for you in your company for over 150 years. trust me to get you through this. And that's what you have to do in all these situations. Is it's like you have to trust that God's goodness and God's provision is far greater than my ability to see past almost the end of the day. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was taking such a short-sighted view of it, and I wasn't looking at it from God's eyes for a long time. And then, you know what? And after that decision was made, did things just become beautiful, and were the birds singing and was the sun always shining? And no, there were a lot of hard days ahead after that, but we got through it. And Lord led us to a couple of great people that came out of it, and it gave me an opportunity. These are the opportunities you don't always ask for, but it gave me an opportunity to ask for forgiveness from a lot of people, and just kind of demonstrate my humility and just go, look, I'm sorry. I don't get it right all the time. And sometimes things are confusing. But I wrote this down. I said, we work so hard at managing or controlling that sometimes it distorts our ability to obey. And that was, that's probably one of my takeaways from that whole thing. It's just like, you can't let, as you're growing a business, you have a deep desire to control and manage, and sometimes that gets out of whack with your desire to obey. I need to constantly check that with my actions during the day.
Yeah, Phil, first of all, thank you for sharing. That is that's humble. Right there. That's humility. That's transparency. See, I talk to a lot of business owners and leaders, and some of what I describe about His Way at Work, or what we do, or how we do things, or what other businesses are doing, initially people think, man, that's so hard. There's so much complexity there. There's so many things we've got to do to come up with a caring strategic plan, right? A caring vision, those kind of things. But you just nailed the hardest thing of all. The hardest thing in a position of business owner is to trust, is to recognize that it's his business. You are his child, and you are a steward of the business that he owns, and he's put you in that position of stewardship for a period. He's going to hold you accountable, but the bigger thing is what I see visually in front of me, what I'm experiencing. I've got a better handle as the owner to be able to take action and make things happen, control or manage. And even though that may be hard, I can do that. But to let go and trust is the ultimate difficult thing for a business owner to do. And it's paradoxical. It's not intuitive. It's counterintuitive to what you would think. But that trust part that you just described, and you didn't just walk in one day, someone give you feedback, and you went, you're right, that guy's a little difficult. I think we need to let him go. God, I'm trusting you on this.
Yeah.
You walked up to it. You were in the Word, letting Him speak to you and slowly move you to a place where you were prepared. And I'll tell you, probably the biggest trust move you made was calling an impartial someone in, because you already knew what the outcome was going to be. And you knew if you did that, you were giving up control, because there's no way you could bring them in, have them report out what you knew they would report, and then not do something. So the trust there was in bringing them in. So I wanted to pause there and sit in that a moment, because so often we look at the things we do in the business as the most difficult, some days more so than others, but it's the stopping, the trusting, the listening that is just not in our nature.
Yeah. Listening was, really listening.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is. You can't listen and not be stopped. Wait, that's not quite right. In order to listen, you must be stopped.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
You can't run and listen.
You can even walk or run it. You can't run and walk and really listen. You got to stop and sit in it, just like you said.
And that by itself, that right there is hard too.
Yeah,
I'm going to block some
is.
time out to sit in a chair.
Yeah.
What if they catch me doing that? Wow.
Yeah.
So you look back at this now. That's been a period of time. One, you were heading into this, and I'll let you finish it, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. But you're heading into this by saying, "All right, you made the tough decision. One, to bring in the impartial investigator, but two, to finally make the ending of the relationship and the job relationship. And it didn't just turn into a spring day with a bluebird on your shoulder. It wasn't just perfect right off the bat. You had mentioned the other day, it was a couple of years before you actually replaced this individual with someone you have full confidence in. Now, it's better than it was before, and things are now much more clear, but just because you made the tough decision doesn't mean it just turned out beautifully at first. So you had to continue trusting, right?
There was a lot of extra work, and I'm like, okay, because people were asking me, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're just going to figure it out. And I guess I'm going to be doing this and this and this for a while, and you guys can try and help with this. And we kind of split it up, and nobody was really excited about doing that. But that was it was the right decision. It was the only decision that we could have made, and just trusted God would create enough margin in our days for us to be able to accomplish what we needed to accomplish to keep moving the business forward.
Yeah. So,
and then waiting on him to try and help us with organizational development, which that's a whole nother podcast right there.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So looking back at this point and taking all that in, what advice would you give to someone today? So there's, in the listening audience, there are some that probably have had this similar experience in the past. I know I personally have, but there are some that may be in that situation right now. So they have someone, the whispers have been in the back of their mind, they've bumped into some rumblings, but they haven't yet completely faced it. How would you advise, what advice would you give to people that are in a position where they think they may have that very similar person or same situation?
What I would say is you need to examine if what you are doing is actually serving yourself, or is it serving others? Who are you serving by either not making that decision or making that decision? And then if you are, and it's our tendency really is in these difficult situations, our tendency really is to serve ourselves. Nobody wants to create more work for themselves. But then you have to ask yourself, is that desire to not do this distorting my ability to obey God's word? And boy, once you get to that point, and once you get to that point and you realize that you're being disobedient to the resources that He's called us to steward, people and plants and processes and property. We're called to be stewards of that, and if we're not stewarding it well, then that's a great opportunity to stop and pray and read and reflect, and then trust in Him to actually do what it is. It's difficult that we can't, like I said, you can't, it's hard for us to sometimes see past the end of the day. God sees in this particular instance with us, and in so many others I can point to. Like, while we don't know what's going to happen as a result of this, we know it's the right move. So we're going to do the right move, even though we don't know exactly how we're going to work on it. But we trust that God's already got this figured out. And you know what, Chris? He's got it figured out way way ahead of where we are at, and our obedience is God does through obedience, but it may not be obvious, and
Yeah.
it may not be easy, but in the end, you know that it's in the end it works out.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And so there may be others listening, Phil, that would say, all right, I'm not in that position. How do I avoid getting there? If you could go back prior to that situation, how do you avoid finding yourself in that place? Not knowing that you're probably not going to avoid it completely. I mean, we're still dealing with people, and we are most imperfect of all of them. So we're not going to avoid all of it. But if there are any steps we can take to avoid that, what would you have done different?
So we had another situation come up after that, and we had just attacked it right away. I was just like, okay, I've been down this road before. I know what this is like if this doesn't get addressed immediately. So we just did a full court press, like almost like in manufacturing, you have these Kaizen events, right, where you just go in and you dive in and you start looking at something. We did the same thing with a bunch of people in a department where there was a problem. Dove in, tried to figure it out, made some adjustments. It didn't work out well, and then we had to pivot a little bit, and then something else happened, and then we made a couple of difficult choices, and all that happened in the span of about maybe 90 days
Instead of 20 years.
Instead of 20. Thanks.
I just want to clarify, you jumped on it, and it did take 90 days. This is not an overnight fix. Now, if you're fixing people issues with overnight fixes, you're not treating them like people.
Yeah,
right. You're going back to numbers.
We learned a lot in this kind of like intensive sort of therapy that we did with this department, and then we ended up having to make a couple of difficult moves. And now when we look back on it, we're like, during that whole time, I mean, it's going to sound kind of cliche, but I mean, I was in prayer the whole time, going, Lord, help me just uncover the truth here. And that is a hard thing. That's a hard thing to do with people.
Yeah.
And but we made some choices, made some decisions, changed quite a few things around, and it's been, the Lord's blessed us with a great team and a healthy team, which is the most important part.
Yeah.
Right. All these things end up with a healthier culture, and it's usually because most of the time when there's a positive impact on the culture, it's because I've kind of removed myself from whatever it is and let other people try and fix it instead of me trying to manage it.
Well, one thing we're going to attack in our next episode, we're going to be meeting with Beth, your caring facilitator at CH Hanson, and we're going to talk about what I'm about to mention with you, which is you've just described your path through this whole situation. What we too often forget in the leadership role is that while we're going down this path, we're not alone in it. We're doing it, and we may be alone with God in this, but we've got observers. And so there are team members and employees and leaders watching our inaction in situations where they know there should be action taken. They may not know what to do or how to do it or want to do it themselves, but they know something's got to be done. And when we're not doing it, we're not earning points, and not this about our points, but we're not leading well, right?
No.
But then flip it to the 90-day picture, and though it didn't just work out perfectly in the first week or two or three, over time, that 90-day period, you came out with a healthier picture because those around you were watching action, loving, caring, but firm action. And so I just give kudos to you on that. We're going to talk to Beth next about what does it look like from a leadership role within a company as you see the CEO struggling with that, and what are some things, one, that you can do in that role to help, but also maybe she'll have some advice for guys like us that will shorten the pain next time, right?
Yeah, hope so.
All right, so final question, Phil, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah.
at what point, at some point in time, you've been given advice over the years. What's one piece of advice you received but wish you had gotten it 10 years earlier, or at least 10 years earlier?
This may be a little, maybe more unique. Maybe it's not unique, but my identity is not tied up in my position, because in a fourth generation family owned business, going to a fifth, I grew up hearing, well, you're the fourth generation, you're the next generation, you're the next generation. What are you going to do as the next generation? And then my identity for a long time was rooted in being a fourth generation family owner, runner, manager, plant manager, president. That was very damaging. And there's a whole nother podcast about that, about how the Lord broke me of that. And I mean, cracked in half, and just like, okay, I am his. And I am here to do his. I am here to serve him, and I'm here to serve others. And it's up to him for the fourth or fifth or sixth or 10th. I can't. That's not up to me. That's up to him. So make sure you understand make sure you understand where your identity is, because it's certainly not in your. It's not in your position.
That's right.
It is in your position as a child of God, and. People don't talk about that very much.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, Phil, as expected, you crushed it. You really are a pleasure to talk with, a good friend. I count you as one, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. I never get off of a call with you not feeling better than when I got on. So thank you for that. Thanks for your time today. And for all you guys are doing.
I enjoyed it anytime, Chris. Love being on your show. Love what you do. Love His Way at Work. I will always be out there trying to help promote you guys, because it's great. It's great stuff. It's important. It's important work. Thank you.
It is. Well, thank you. You have a great one.